It's not only the day that the fax machine is suddenly back in vogue, the archaic communications device from the 70s becomes the center of the universe for college football programs. It's the final day of 18-year-olds ruling the sport we love and causing seven-figure coaches to sweat and stare at same fax machine. It's a crazy day, make no mistake about it, but it's also the most important day in college football. Yes, your National Signing Day final report right here, right now on College Football Coast to Coast. Next. All right, college football fans, this is your place to be. Of course, every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time here on Mark Rogers TV's College Football Coast to Coast. We've been here for 11 weeks, and we've expanded the show for this 2-week frame because you know why. It's recruiting season, and today is that day, the day unlike any other day because we actually rank these teams, we rank these programs based on nothing that's happened on the field, but based on signing 18-year-old football players, most of which will not see the field this fall, but we're hoping will pull through as impact players and score game-winning touchdowns against our rivals and in big postseason play. Thanks so much for joining us for College Football Coast to Coast. Over the next 2 hours, we will bring you reports from all over the place. Before we get to our first contributor, I want to let you know here on Mark Rogers TV, if you're discovering our channel here for the first time on YouTube, check out 3,000. I didn't add a zero. 3,000 college football videos. And today we knocked out National Signing Day reports on USC, Stanford, South Carolina, UCLA, and Pitt. We're just getting started because we've got 21 to do here in the next 2 hours. Join us on YouTube at Mark Rogers TV. Follow me on Twitter. I will follow back. We'll debate and discuss college football, and also, of course, Facebook. So if you're not catching us live, the live broadcaster is at 8 o'clock Eastern Time every Wednesday night. Facebook Live, YouTube Live, but don't worry if you miss it. Of course, it's recorded, and you can find it right on Mark Rogers TV on YouTube. Okay, let's start with arguably the best recruiting class in the nation, even though it was a pretty small class for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ben Van Oyn joins us from the Ozone to discuss the Buckeyes class. And we knew, Ben, in discussing this last week at this time, that there wouldn't be a whole lot of drama for Urban Meyer. The coaching staff just did so much work to get ready for this day that they pretty much had this class in place, and it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, they had, like I said last week, 9 early enrollees that were already enrolled, so they were only waiting on 11 letters of intent this morning, and then they were waiting on Jay Tufele to announce, and he ended up picking USC. And then Thayer Munford, he was the offensive lineman out of Massillon. He selected Ohio State, so he became the 21st commitment. And then all of Buckeye Nation was really hoping that Marvin Wilson, the big defensive tackle out of Texas, would pick Ohio State, but alas, he chose Florida State in the end. So Ohio State still signed 21 kids in this class, still the number 2 class in the nation. They filled a lot of needs, and really excited about what Ohio State did this year.
Yeah, and checking out the 24/7 composite, it's 21 commits. You're saying 22 commits. The 5 stars total 5. So 5 stars are quite the commodity, the rare commodity in college football. There are very few programs, I believe 6 or 7 today, that signed multiple 5-star athletes. And for Ohio State, that's 5-star recruits according to 24/7, 14 4-stars, 2 3-stars. We know that Ohio, Ben, is a talent-rich state. We also know that the population is shifting, and it's becoming more and more difficult for those northern powers to stay up with the teams from the SEC in particular. How does Urban Meyer lock down Ohio but still run to Texas and Florida to grab elite athletes and get them out of SEC country? I don't know if Ben can hear me now, unfortunately. I wanted to get some more information from Ben.
Yep, I'm here, sorry.
Go ahead, Ben. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just curious, getting your take on Urban Meyer's success there at Ohio State. We discussed it last week. You or I could bring in a top 25 class, but we're talking about arguably historic classes. Certainly the 2013 version was, and he's doing it by locking down Ohio. We know it's a recruiting-rich state, talent-rich state, but it's on the decline because of the population shift. So it's becoming more and more difficult for the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame to keep up, but he's still able to kind of get over that barrier.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State is Ohio football, so the name speaks to itself. Obviously, there are programs around the state of Ohio, like Michigan State, Notre Dame, that do come in and pluck kids out. And Ohio State only had 7 commitments this year from Ohio, which is normally not very much. Commitments, so.
Hey, Ben, in looking at the class
Coming from Ohio, that's a little less than 5 out of the state of Texas, which is unheard of. And so they're having to in order to attract more kids, more of the top of the country.
Hey, Ben, the situation there, the dynamics within the league and especially the division, much different than they were just a few years ago when Urban Meyer first took over the head coaching job at Ohio State in 2012. James Franklin now at Penn State, reeling in top 15 classes. We'll hear from Ellie Moretta-Felice on Penn State a little bit later. Michigan State, obviously a factor. Michigan, Jim Harbaugh doing great work there. We'll get a report from Michigan as well. DJ Durkin at Maryland. So Urban Meyer not necessarily just controlling everything, but the rivalries on the recruiting trail have become pretty intense in the division.
Yeah, with the hiring of top-notch head coaches in the Big Ten, obviously they're coming in and they're trying to make their mark, whether it be in Ohio or in the states surrounding Ohio. I said on Twitter today that Maryland was by far the most shocking class in terms of top rankings. They pulled in a top 15 class, and wouldn't have expected that from them. But everybody in the Big Ten is hiring quality coaches, and recruiting is just going to become that more complex going forward.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Maryland just removed for 2 years from a 2-10 season, wins 6 games this past year, and suddenly a bottom feeder in the Big Ten is reeling in a top 15 class. Definitely Ohio State still the king of the Big Ten, both on the field for the most part, and definitely in the recruiting wars for the time being. Ben Van Ooyen joins us from the Ozone. Ben, we appreciate the time. We will need you back a number of times, I'm sure, in the coming months.
All right, great. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, you've run into college football coast to coast, and this is our National Signing Day special. And we come your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We have reports from all the Power 5 conferences headed your way over the next 2 hours. Welcome in Connor Tapp from 24/7 Sports. Connor's been writing there for the last few years after a stay there with SB Nation and South Carolina's site there. Connor, we appreciate you jumping on board. What's going on?
Well, quite a bit. Just another pretty wild signing day. I guess, by historical standards, it's pretty quiet in terms of a lot of early enrollees are becoming a bigger and bigger trend, and we sort of knew where most of the big names that we're announcing today were going. So maybe a little less signing day craziness than normal, but still a very wild and exciting day.
Yeah, so as you tracked it throughout the day, what in particular caught your eye or maybe caused you to kind of scratch your head or maybe bust a gut? I don't know.
Well, in terms of busting a gut, Southern Cal had a top 100 linebacker commit by removing a series of shirts until revealing that his third shirt was the shirt of the Southern Cal Trojans. So that was maybe my favorite commitment announcement of the day. But in terms of trends, Alabama had its 7th #1 class according to the 24/7 Sports composite in a row. and your eyes might be tempted to gloss over and say, oh yeah, but this happens every year. But the thing is, this class, according to our composite score, is the best that Nick Saban has had at Alabama, and the second best that we've ever recorded, with the 2010 Florida class being the only one that's topped it. So, Nick Saban and Alabama have loaded up, and it's scary. They didn't quite meet their goal that they wanted this year, but in terms of coming up short against Clemson, but they're restocked and ready to go. Some other things going on. I mean, it's the people that are good at recruiting are still really good at recruiting. LSU had a lot of breaks go its way early in the day, stealing Clavon Chason from Texas, where it seemed like he was going to stay in state. Ended up missing on Marvin Wilson toward the end of the day. But it was a pretty big day for Ed Orgeron, and a lot of teams that are already good staying good. Got a couple of teams sneaking up there, like Maryland having a sneaky good class, and Stanford and Clemson had some smaller classes, but very densely packed with premium top grade talent. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on how those groups of players end up faring.
Yeah, Connor, we're going to talk a little Stanford later in the show, but we're looking at a program that has reached 3 consecutive Rose Bowls in recent years with like top 40 recruiting classes, and now they've got a top 12 to 13 class, and we'll see what David Shaw is able to do with that kind of talent. But certainly the best talent in the Pac-12 is going to USC. Clay Helton, less than 7 or 8 months ago, not even that, at the beginning of the football season, we were thinking maybe he wasn't big enough for this job, and now he's winning on signing day, getting into the top 5.
Yeah, closed out the day with a pair of commitments from some kids right there in his backyard in Los Angeles. The number 1 overall athlete in our class, Greg Johnson, and his high school teammate, Joseph Lewis, 5-star wide receiver. So it's kind of become a thing lately. No matter who the coach has been, Southern Cal just tends to show up big on signing day. And, part of that is down to the fact that Southern Cal is just always in the mix with the kinds of recruits that are going to stretch it out until the very end. But yeah, I mean, with the way Clay Helton has things going, it is really impressive how he's got things turned around. And the longer that USC's sort of stagnation continued, you wondered if it would tarnish the brand that made it so appealing to kids that grew up watching Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. But now that you've got Sam Darnold under center for the next couple of years, and you've got some more great talent coming in, it certainly appears as though Southern Cal's got things going in the right direction.
Tom Herman's pretty much had the Midas touch after leaving Ohio State. He was the offensive coordinator there. They had a dynamic showing in the college football playoffs. He's the hot commodity, goes to Houston, wins big there, wins a Big 6 bowl, and that parlays him into a big job at Texas. But not necessarily today. Very difficult for Texas to keep those uncommitted players at home. Ohio State, Florida State, USC, UCLA, other schools jumping in on Texas turf and really reeling in some of the better non-committed players, at least on this final day.
Yeah, I mean, it was a disappointing day for Texas, and we wrote a feature on our site pointing out that this is the worst finish Texas has ever had since we started doing recruiting rankings. Now, mind you, they're just 26th in our composite, so by many teams' standard, that's a perfectly fine or even great class. But for Texas, they certainly have higher expectations than a lot of programs do, given their history. But, Tom Herman gets a lot of credit for being a great recruiter, and he is, but anytime you're stepping in and taking over one of these transitional classes, it's tough. And today they lost out on Clavon Chason, who is the comp that gets thrown around on him all the time is Arden Key. And it would certainly be very exciting for them to have been able to keep him in state, and it seemed like that's the way it was headed. So maybe if the result of one teenager's decision breaks a little bit different way, maybe we're having a different conversation about Tom Herman in Texas right now. And they've got a very nice quarterback commit, Westlake product, Sam Ellinger committed in this class, and a couple of other nice pieces too. But maybe not like the program changer on defense that Chason could be if he hits his upside potential. But I think it's really the second recruiting class where you can really start to judge results. And given Tom Herman's long track record of being a great recruiter, I don't think we're not anywhere close to. Man hasn't even coached a game yet. So Texas fans are prone to panic, maybe a little bit more so than other fan bases, but I think things are going to be fine.
No question about that. Connor, we like to think here at Mark Rogers TV, and especially on College Football Coast to Coast, that we speak to the intelligent, the smart fan, the thinking fan. So definitely, if you love college football and want to dig a little bit deeper, check out Connor's work at 247 Sports. He writes some exceptional stuff, delving into some things, as we talked about with the College Football Playoff Committee 2 weeks ago, that maybe not the average fan's thinking about, but some interesting stuff out of Connor on a regular basis. Connor, we appreciate it.
You bet. Always a pleasure, man.
All right. National Signing Day coming to a wrap. Alabama on top, but Ohio State, Florida State, LSU right there, as well as Michigan closing well under Jim Harbaugh. Tennessee maybe not having quite the kind of class that it's had in recent years. 17th in the nation, according to 24/7. Butch Jones was able to reel in 3 consecutive top 5 classes, the other one in that top 15 range. So he's certainly gotten it done on the recruiting trail. And to talk Tennessee sports, Tennessee football in particular, we always go to Mike LaValle from Last Word on College Football. Mike, and I'm looking it over, and like we talked about last week, it's a mighty big class in regards to numbers at 28. Trey Smith in the fold, as he has been for quite some time, arguably the best player in the country. So your thoughts as things came to a close today?
Mark, you hit the nail on the head. Tennessee fans are having a hard time getting excited after today's National Signing Day for Tennessee. You mentioned it, they were ranked 17th by the 247 composite, but really with 28 players, when you look at the star average per player, they're really 22nd. So this is really a top 25 class, not really a top 17 class. That'll put Tennessee 7th in the conference, 3rd in the division. And they're only 4 spots ahead of South Carolina. That's not going to make Tennessee fans very happy. This is easily Tennessee's lowest ranked class, at least on National Signing Day, of the last 4 seasons. 14th last year, 4th place finish in 15, and 7th place finish in 2014. Butch Jones called it in his post-National Signing Day presser a balanced class from top to bottom. He said it was his most positive year on the trail, with high school coaches and college and high school principals telling him about how impressed they are with Tennessee's program and Tennessee being back. But this National Signing Day, coupled with the disappointing 2016 regular season, kind of seems that Butch Jones' momentum at Tennessee might be slowing down a little bit. 2 disappointing points for Tennessee fans. 1, the in-state performance of Butch Jones. Only 3 of the top 11 players from Tennessee, 5 of the top 20 are going to Tennessee. You'd like to see, for an in-state school like Tennessee, you'd like to see 4 or 5, maybe 6 of those top 12, and maybe 7, 8 of your top 20. Tennessee high school football is getting better, especially the mid-state. But Tennessee lost out to some top talent, to LSU and Clemson. Both took 2 guys out of Tennessee, to include Amari Rogers and T. Higgins. Big losses right there out of Knoxville. Maryland came in, took a top 10 Tennessee kid. Memphis, Arkansas, and Oregon also took top 10 players right there out of Tennessee. The second thing that Tennessee fans are going to be a little bit disappointed about is they didn't win a lot of the head-to-head battles in the recruiting, in the recruitment of these young players. They won the battle with Trey Smith. He's a Tennessee guy, grew up as a Tennessee fan, lives in Tennessee, so that's not terribly surprising. But when they went head-to-head with LSU, Clemson, Florida, Georgia, they didn't win many of those battles. So that's got to be a little disappointing for Tennessee fans. 2 bits of good news coming out of National Signing Day. Jones has had success. Jones and his staff have had success in the past finding good talent in the 3-star level. So there's definitely potential in this class. While Tennessee fans might be a little disappointed, there is potential for this class to contribute on the field as we move forward. And then Butch Jones pulled in recruits out of 10 states. He pulled as many recruits out of Florida as he did Tennessee. Also had success in Louisiana, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. So he was able to get out and pull kids in from some really good recruiting hotbeds.
Mike, I don't want to say that the window's closing on Tennessee because that would be a ridiculous overstatement. But in regards to the way the dynamics worked in the division in terms of coaches coming and leaving and programs going up and down, of course, Florida was coming off a pretty substantial high before Will Muschamp hit town. South Carolina was very strong with 11 consecutive 11-game winning seasons under Steve Spurrier. So South Carolina coming down off of that. Florida in a slump. Georgia took a bit of a break between Mark Richt and Kirby Smart, at least maybe for 1 year, in only going 7-5. But now, bam, Kirby Smart shows that he is going to be a serious factor on the recruiting trail. Jim McElwain closed strong today. South Carolina, even under Will Muschamp, had a nice class. Maybe some thoughts that it was almost the clearly the best program or the program on the rise there for a couple of years, and now it's getting crowded at the top.
Yeah, Mark, that's what I was talking about with Jones's momentum at Tennessee slowing down. If you look, Tennessee has been kind of the favorite with all the momentum the last 2 years. The hype train has been stopping at the Knoxville station in the offseason. If you look at Georgia today with a top 3 class, Kirby Smart, kind of implementing the system there at Georgia that he brought over from his time with Nick Saban at Alabama. It looks like Georgia's probably going to be getting that hype train this offseason and riding that into all the preseason polls. But I still think the SEC East is wide open. Georgia had some struggles last year. They're bringing in some great talent and got some good returning players coming in and a good young quarterback. But they still haven't proven it on the field. Florida is kind of struggling a little bit. McElwain closed well today. But still, I think if you look at the star rating, I still think that's more of a top 20, top 25 class. South Carolina had a very decent recruiting class, but we still have to see if they can put it together on the field. I still think the SEC East is wide open. Tennessee certainly has a chance. They lost a lot of their star players this year, but they have a large number of starters coming back. It's just that all the starters who are coming back were not the stars this year. So I do think the Jones momentum is slowing down in Knoxville, but it's not the window has not closed.
Mike LaValle joining us from Last Word on College Football, talking some Tennessee. Mike, we appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
All right, the Vols, 23 three-star commits according to 24/7's composite out of the 28 total signed. That's nothing close to what Butch Jones has been able to bring into Knoxville over the past few years. Of course, Alabama and Ohio State came into the day as clearly the 1 and 2 classes. Strong pushes late in the day by USC, Georgia, and LSU put some pressure on Bama and the Buckeyes at the top. But certainly there's another class that we really need to highlight, and it's not so much the quantity at Stanford, but the quality. And we bring in Don King from Last Word on Sports to talk about this Stanford class. Don, it's great to see you, one of our original contributors here at Mark Rogers TV. And this is an amazing situation when you talk about a coaching staff that's proven that it can develop, I don't want to call it marginal talent because that would not be correct because these guys move on to the NFL, but top 40 type classes that have won Pac-12 championships consistently and won Rose Bowls. And now this is like a fringe top 10 class.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. I have to tell you, Nerd Nation is delighted today. For a class of only 14 commits to rank fairly consistently in the top 15 in the nation, Stanford has never had a class with 3 5-stars all in the same year, and has done so today. And in fact, all 14 of the signees who have been added to full scholarship status are 3-star or better, and 9 of the 14 are actually either 4 stars or 5 stars. It's a fantastic class, and you hit the nail right on the head. It is all about quality over quantity this year.
Yeah, I ran down the commits, like you say, 14. 7 of those guys are rated in the top 10 at their position. So we're talking about cream of the crop. And we know the difficulty of the academic standards at Stanford, but also there's certainly a cachet. If you can get mom and dad on board, from a football standpoint, certainly they're going to fall in love with the academics if you have a son that's able to meet those standards. What else do you like about this class?
Yeah, honestly, the best thing about it is kind of the composition from a position of need standpoint. You know, it's hard now, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Stanford struggled to a 10-3 record in 2016. You know, back in my day, I don't think Stanford won 10 games in my 4 years on campus. But at any rate, the struggle early in the season was all about the offensive line failing to come together as quickly as it traditionally has. And by the estimation of at least a couple of the different ranking services, Stanford nailed the number 1 and number 2 offensive tackle prospects in the nation, and they're both 5 stars. You know, on a unanimous basis. I don't care who you look at; they may be ranked slightly differently, but they're both outstanding and they're both massive. You know, like 6'7", 6'8". You know, 311 and 315 coming out of high school as 17 and 18-year-olds, which is crazy. And, you know, then by many services, the number 1 ranked pocket passer in the nation, Davis Mills from Georgia, coming in as well to add some depth at that position. And also one of the top tight ends in the nation as well, Colby Parkinson from Westlake Village, California, also joining this class. So it's tremendous. It's not the largest signing class. It's not the deepest, but the talent is absolutely undeniable.
It is tremendous, and it's a bit curious to me because Stanford didn't start winning big 2 years ago. So this has been going on for 8 or 9 years at Stanford, rising to the elite of college football. So there's that talk about what kind of push, what kind of bump are you going to get from a big season? Well, Stanford didn't have, by their new standards, a big season last year, but they certainly did 2 years ago in winning the Rose Bowl with Christian McCaffrey gaining all that attention. So maybe that was the bump. Otherwise, I can't explain why a team that recruits in the 40s suddenly has a fringe top 10 class.
Yeah, I actually think you nailed it, Mark. This, you know, unlike the USC class we discussed earlier, this was not one of those late, hard-charging, fast-closing classes like Stanford had back in 2010 or 2011 with that huge offensive line haul. These guys have all been in the fold for the most part, you know, at least for 3 or 4 weeks now since learning of their admission status, and they've held firm. So I think Shaw and company have done a great job marketing the program, selling the concept of a 40-year decision as opposed to a 4-year decision. And they've made that work really well, really consistently, and it's played extremely well in living rooms across the country.
It is the second best class according to all the major services within the Pac-12, and look out because the top 5 and 6 and 7 classes in the Pac-12 were winning the conference. Don King joins us from Last Word on Sports. Don, we always appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, yes, the Stanford Cardinal. Always an interesting dynamic when you start talking Stanford and we talk about the negatives or the challenges in trying to get the best football players out there because of the academic requirements, but also there's certainly cachet and there's certainly an advantage if you are able to hone in on those young men that are able to meet the standards, because certainly mom and dad most likely will be on board with their son going to Stanford University. All right, let's move it to the East Coast, a little bit closer to the East Coast with Syracuse coming off a bit of a challenging season with 2 wins in the ACC, 4 wins overall. We bring in John Casillo from Noon's Magician. John, thanks for jumping on with us tonight.
Yeah, of course.
So 247's got you at 55th in the country, and certainly you write for a program and cover a program where you're not necessarily looking at those numbers and not vying for a particular rank. So you're looking a little bit deeper into the quality of the prospects and how it fits your program, the personnel losses. So how do you feel about the class right now?
You know, I feel pretty good. You know, you look at how last year we really kind of had to struggle over about a month and a half when Dino Babers arrived to scrap the class that was there to fit Scott Schaefer's system and move to a much faster spread offense and a whole new defensive scheme as well. So this year, having a full cycle, no, we're not seeing, 5 stars, run in the door, and that's probably never going to happen. But what we are seeing right now is guys who really do fit the system, and ones that either were overlooked in places like Florida, places like Michigan, Ohio, places that are, loaded with talent, and in some of the lower divisions in the high school ranks, those are the guys that, Babers and his staff have been able to get repeatedly, both when they were at Bowling Green and now at Syracuse.
You mentioned Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, some of those places with fine high school football talent. One of those other states, of course, is New Jersey, and that's where you were able to reel in one of the top pro-style quarterbacks in the nation, a top 10 player in Tommy DeVito. We got to see him this afternoon on ESPN. And your thoughts about what you've heard of him, maybe what you've seen on video about a possible starting quarterback for you.
I mean, DeVito really is, he's a true ambassador for the program, but on top of that, he's a legitimate player. What he did at Don Bosco, he was able to lead his team to a state championship game. I actually got to see him out here in Los Angeles at the Elite 11 event, and he held his own against a lot of, quarterbacks at quote unquote better schools. He's a guy that, has a lot of touch, a lot of accuracy. He knows how to make some really impressive throws already. And that, when I saw him, that was back in the fall, so the beginning of his senior year of high school. And he's the type of guy who can really kind of lead this program and be a great fit for what Dino Babers wants to do.
So overall, looking at the class, and again, we forget the ranking because once you get to this point in the rankings, I don't know that they're nationally actually that relevant. Dino Babers on the recruiting trail, what would be your evaluation of him finishing up the class from last year and now this second class?
I mean, I think, I'll give him a B+ for the time being. I think you just got to couch against the fact that this is building on something that was pretty far down the list in terms of, appealing jobs and appealing places to play when he took over. And I think, if this year we see progress, then the ante gets up for him, but then the selling point gets up for him as well. So right now, B+, but he has a lot of potential to turn that into an A over the next couple of years.
All right. If you want to keep up on Syracuse athletics in general, Syracuse football in particular, join John on Noon's Magician there on the SB Nation platform for Syracuse athletics. John, thanks for jumping on board for our big National Signing Day special.
Of course. Thanks, Mark.
All right, John Casillo from Noon's Magician. We talked about the job that Dino Babers did today and for the last few months there at Syracuse, and in meeting the challenge in which it's sometimes difficult to get people to Syracuse with fine football ability. A set of different challenges at Baylor because of the off-the-field issues with Baylor at times, and we will talk some Baylor football a little bit later in the show. Kevin McGuffey is joining us right now to talk Kentucky. Kevin joins us from Last Word on Sports. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem. So we need the Kentucky take. A lot of challenges there in the SEC, and we saw what Kirby Smart was able to do over the last few weeks in closing a dynamic class. Butch Jones has had his success, maybe fallen off a little bit, but maybe the East is coming back at this point. Maybe that's not good news for Wildcat fans because it appears as though you're gaining some steam as well. So according to 24/7 Sports, this is definitely a top 30 class, 4 4-star recruits out of 24 total signees.
Yeah, definitely, top 30 class, as you said, by all of the scouting services. The coaching staff thinks that, when this is all said and done, it could be, their best class, even better than the 2014, which featured Drew Barker, Matt Elam, and a host of others. To say that they're excited about this class would be a vast understatement.
So, Kevin, who do you like? We see a lot of names here. Again, it's 24 signees. Can you pick out a few that, based on what you've seen, what you've heard, that you're looking forward to seeing on the field?
The 3 that probably jump out the most, number 1 is Lynn Bowden. He's out of Mark Stoops' stomping grounds in Youngstown, Ohio. He's listed as an athlete. He played quarterback, running back. He was responsible for 57 touchdowns as a senior. Vince Marrow, UK's ace recruiting coordinator, said today, he said, quote, "We think we got the best player in the state of Ohio in Bowden." So that's, you know how good the talent is in Ohio, and that's some strong words there. The coaches are already talking about, there's comparisons to Randall Cobb. The coaching staff's talking about having him, run the Wildcat like they did with Benny Snell, this year, like they used to do with Randall Cobb in the past when he was at Kentucky. He's probably the one who's going to come in and probably play somewhere from day one. Another guy is Joshua Pascal. He's he played defensive end from out of Maryland. He committed to Kentucky, and then Penn State made a late run at him, but he reaffirmed his commitment and signed today. Coaching staff, like I said, he played defensive end in high school, but the coaching staff sees him as a linebacker, sort of along the lines of a Bud Dupree, who is doing great things with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then a third player is Javonte Richardson. He's a wide receiver. He put up some very impressive numbers. Kentucky's deep at the wide receiver position, but they think he can come in and challenge for playing time pretty much from day one.
All right, Kentucky with a difficult situation in regards to being on the periphery of the SEC footprint, and certainly when we look at ESPN's top 300 recruits, we see where Kentucky, I believe, had one out of the 300, where the SEC is accounting for about 58 or 59% of ESPN's 300. So Kentucky with the challenges there, but meeting those challenges with a top 30 class. Now, where that ranks in the SEC, well, you can do the math. It's certainly a difficult challenge to break that top 8 to 10 in the conference. But Kentucky coming off 7 wins and a bowl appearance for the first time in a few years, off to a good start here to get toward breaking more goals and achieving more goals here in 2017. Kevin McGuffey joining us from Last Word on Sports. Kevin, we appreciate the time.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
All right, you've joined us on College Football Coast to Coast. We come your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time for just about an hour. But, of course, it is National Signing Day in college football, so we will be on with you for about 2 hours tonight. And we have a number of guests lined up, including one of our faves. Shireen Ryan joins us from Zona Zealots covering Arizona football. Shireen, how you doing tonight? I'm guessing Shireen has her mic muted.
I do.
Which I will take partial blame because I asked our guests to mute their mics before they came on so that there wouldn't be background noise. But then the trick to that is you've got to remember to unmute it. So, Shireen, thanks for joining us. How you doing today?
Good. Muting me, the only way to do it is to use the microphone.
I could have said that, but you're a lady and I'm a gentleman, so I refrained. So, Shireen, I know that you weren't in the best of moods last week when we talked recruiting because your Wildcats lost a few potential signees, and you weren't necessarily going to be the first one on the bandwagon on the West Coast to form the Willie Taggart fan club. So where do things stand after everything was signed on the dotted line today?
Things stand pretty good. We have 2 4-stars. We have Jalen Harris, who's a legacy from Sean Harris, the big star we had at Arizona in the 1990s. He was going to go to maybe Notre Dame. He had kind of decommitted and went on a game, but he reconfirmed his commitment today, and his stars went up from 3 to 4. Now, personally, if you're going to look at the Arizona class, you don't look at the stars. They're all stars to us. But, diamonds in the rough is Rich Rod's specialty. And this morning, I swore on my life almost that Cody Shear was going to come to. He had confirmed many times with me and also with the media in Arizona the night before. But 7:45 a.m. this morning, guess who decided to offer Cody Shear?
I'm going to guess it begins with an O and it's not Oklahoma State.
So, you know, Cody can see Oregon from his backyard, the University of Oregon, he said. And he had been waiting a long time for the offer, but he was really, 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 really big on Arizona. And then at 7 o'clock, I guess Taggart said he had a room for him if he still wanted to come. I guess it was his dream. We didn't know it was his dream, but it was his dream. So, you know, you got to go where you really want to go. And a lot of time went into it. And Rich Rod went into that later. Today, he went into the fact that, you know, coaches put in so much time and money. I mean, like average of $27,000 per recruit or commit that they put in. And it's just so sad. On the other hand, you know, and he has a good point, you focus on the ones who want to come to your school. So we have Nathan Tilford. We have 5 Arizona players, not to mention, I think there's another 10 to 12 that Rodriguez named off today. His son also committed and signed on the dotted line. He said he had like 10,000 official visits to Arizona, so that was kind of cute. And then we have Reddy Short was a UCLA commit, and he reconfirmed his commitment to Arizona, so that was nice. And then I talked to Josh Brown out of Long Beach Poly. He's very excited to Arizona. He never once wavered, no matter what happened, so that was good. But I did spend the afternoon with Greg Johnson, and was from USC, and if you want to check out that video, go to In the Front Row on YouTube, In the Front Row LA on Twitter. Just had to put my little plug there. But yes, they committed to USC, and kind of scared to play USC right now. They have a huge class.
Well, Shireen, they're not all going to be on the field this fall. They're going to be backups. You've got a couple of years to brace yourself. In regards to gearing up for that class. And just keep in mind that you were generally rated the 8th class in the Pac-12, number 45 in the nation, according to 24/7 Sports. So there's a whole bunch of programs out there in worse shape than Arizona and Rich Rodriguez. And we know that your coach has a winning track record, and he's able to coach them up. So there is hope. Now, on the downside, Colorado's coming. And there's a doormat that's no longer a doormat in your division. So it's a difficult division once again.
Right, and we lost our AD to Alabama, so that didn't help. But, you know, you go back to 2-star Scooby, right? Scooby Wright, who plays for the Arizona Cardinals in the NFL, and he was a diamond in the rough. He was a JUCO transfer. And, you know, he just tweeted out his picture of when he committed to Arizona. So, I mean, you never know who you're going to get. And the players they're looking for somebody who's going to give them the truth, not make up a whole bunch of promises. And a lot of the kids that are coming in, they can compete right away. They can be on that field, you know, this season. And some of them came early. Nathan Tilford came early. He's already in school. We have Sione, who's already in school. So we have a lot of players who are getting started in the spring. And so class is 45, but it was 15 until 5 or 6 of our players decommitted and went to Oregon. So now what is Oregon, number 17?
They're up there in the top 20 somewhere.
I can't wait for those Pac-12 conference calls. I really can't wait to ask him questions.
But Shireen, you are so right. We get wrapped up in the rankings and the stars, and Scooby Wright is like the classic example. Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, went crazy, was just exceptional, gaining all sorts of national awards as a 2-star, as you so eloquently pointed out. But those stories are in each program. You take a successful program, especially at the likes of Wisconsin or Michigan State, they have 2 stars. They contribute, impact players. It happens, and it's not that rare. Shireen Ryan joining us from Zona Zealots. Please join her there for coverage of Arizona football, basketball, and everything else. And I know that you're excited about basketball, so hopefully your boys can finish off well in March.
Well, they got chipped. East Coast bias put them at number 5. Gonzaga with their weak schedule sitting at number 1.
All right. Just compare it to football. You'll be happy with 5. All right. Thanks, Shireen. We'll see you soon.
No, I love my football team. All right. Bear down.
All right, college football coast to coast every Wednesday night. If you're joining us for the first time, you love college football. If you don't love college football, I have no idea why you're watching us. If you love college football, then you need to join us each and every week. If you can't catch us live on Facebook or on my YouTube channel at Mark Rogers TV, 8 o'clock Eastern time every Wednesday, hey, we got the record right there ready for you. Michigan closed well. They picked up one of the top players in the country late. That was a bit of a surprise, plucking him out of Alabama. I believe we've got Tanner Wooten on the line from Maize n Brew. Tanner?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, as far as their finish goes, probably the best outcome they could have hoped for, with Solomon committing the 5-star defensive tackle about 3 hours south of Atlanta in Georgia, in Leesburg. So really deep south. Like I said, big-time commitment for Michigan. They have a lot of question marks on the interior defensive line, and he kind of fills some of those needs. And, you pair him with Rashawn Gary, number 1 player last year, and that's a scary sight for opposing offenses to play Michigan. And then they also closed on Nico Collins, the wide receiver out of Pinson, Alabama, top 150 player. Seemed to be trending to Georgia, but lately the crystal balls really started to flood in with predictions for Michigan, and, they were able to close on him. He lost his 2 primary recruiters when Jed Fish took the offensive coordinator position at UCLA, and Tyrone Wheatley left for the NFL to coach running backs with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Jim Harbaugh really took the recruitment over. And then Pep Hamilton, the new co-offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach, and assistant head coach, really did a good job of closing that recruitment down. It sounded like he was Michigan, all the way through from June, July, when he made a couple visits. I believe he visited unofficially 4 times to Ann Arbor. So as far as them being able to close that down, that gave them 5 wide receiver commitments, all 4 stars. The big fish, Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Cass Tech in Detroit, number 1 wide receiver in the country, according to the 24/7 composite. He's one of 2 5-stars in the class along with Solomon. And then you have Tariq Black, who committed in December from Cheshire Academy in Connecticut. Oliver Martin out of Iowa City West, number 1 player in the state of Iowa. And then you also have Brad Hawkins, who was committed last year with the prep school route and now is back in the 2017 class, signed and ready to go for the summer. And as far as this class, I mean, just the outreach that they had as far as across the country. I mean, they had the number 1 players in the state of Michigan, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Iowa, Quebec, and New Mexico. So, I mean, it's a national reaching class.
Yeah, Tanner, every recruiting class is extremely important, but considering what you lost in your senior class from this outstanding 2016 team, not that these guys are generally going to fill in as impact players, but they provide depth, provide special teams help, and we're talking a class of 30, so it's a large class, and the quality's off the charts as well. So just what Michigan's been able to do under Jim Harbaugh, and just to see him out there operating and working his magic, just has to be exciting. Of course, you want to see it play out on the field, and you've had 2 outstanding 10-10 win seasons back to back, but of course you're winning a Big Ten championship. But you can see it coming with what you've seen produced on the field, and these recruiting classes have been outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of depth and quality talent that's being brought into the program is really impressive. From 2014 to 2016, so those 3 recruiting classes, there was only 29 4-star and 5-star recruits that came to Ann Arbor, and in this class alone, there's 21. Over 66% of the recruiting class is 4 and 5 stars, so it's loaded up front. I don't think it has the star power necessarily of last year. Obviously, they had the number 1 player, Rashawn Gary, but I do think this class is a little bit deeper, around the same size. Nationally, as far as the rankings go, it's pretty much similar. They're 5th this year on 24/7, I believe. They're able to hold off LSU after they did not get Marvin Wilson. But this class is just really full of really good athletes. Obviously, the quarterback, Christian McCaffrey's little brother Dylan, out of Valor Christian, Colorado, just great bloodlines there. High upside, and a guy that could be starting for Michigan down the road at quarterback. And they've got a bunch of guys who are top 5 at their position as well. I mean, Peoples-Jones, the 5-star to Detroit I mentioned before, Cesar Ruiz, number 1 center in the country, Oliver Solomon again, number 2 defensive tackle in the country, Luigi Villan, number 5 weak side defensive end in the country, and then McCaffrey is the number 5 pro style. So there is a lot of talent, and it's deep, and it's I think with this class they pushed their 4 and 5 stars. I think over half the roster now are former 4 and 5 star recruits.
Tanner Wooten, the latest in a long line of contributors from Maize n Brew that we welcomed on and have done a tremendous job for us. Josh Henske, Anthony Broom, and now you, Tanner. So we appreciate you coming on for the first time, and it was a bit of a fire drill, so we apologize for that. But we'll have you on for some more segments. But we're just trying to go rapid fire and get as many people in and out as possible. So Tanner, we appreciate you running down the Michigan class for us.
Anytime, Mark. I'll be on anytime you want. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, we know what a splash he has made in Ann Arbor, doing something just about every week that has people shaking their heads or busting a gut, one or the other. But when it comes to recruiting, he's getting the job done, bottom line. Jim Mora with a good get late in the process on National Signing Day. One of the first announcements of the day. Stefan Zabia, yes, the offensive tackle. I was reaching back into the cobwebs to remember early this morning. What was the first announcement I heard? I knew it was a UCLA player. Yes, Tony Syracuse joins us from Last Word on Sports to run down the UCLA class that looks rather stellar. It's a top 20 class, Tony. So we spoke last week. Your thoughts now that it's all pulled in and we've got all the names on the dotted line?
Well, Mark, when we talked last week, I think I referred to it as, a work in progress, and everything pretty much came to be the way it was expected. You got to look at, they got Jalen Phillips, who was one of the top players in the country, and they got Darnay Holmes, and those kids were already locked in. They're already actually in school, so there was really no question there. They got Elijah Gates last week when we spoke, and he signed on the dotted line. So they filled in the defensive holes that they needed because, as we pointed out, they were losing 7 starters on the defensive side of the ball. And so when Mora woke up this morning, as you pointed out, it was the first one at 5:45 this morning, Mora at 5:45 Los Angeles time. And Mora gets the word that Stefan Zabia from Westlake High School in Austin, Texas, was coming. That was a bit of a surprise. They beat out Ole Miss and they beat out Texas for him. In Texas, if you look at the Longhorn sites, Texas thought they had him locked in. Now the kid is highly valued, highly recruited, 6'5", 290 pounds, but he is a bit of a project. And as you have pointed out throughout the night, a lot of these kids are not going to see the field right away. You put into the UCLA's offensive line was dismal last year, but they have a lot of depth. They have a lot of returning players. It's about finding one who can, finding a group of 5 that you can rely on from week to week. This kid only started playing football in 2015. So he's got size, he's got the frame, he's got footwork, he's got good handwork as well, but he is a project. Sorry about that, little problem there.
Hey, Tony, as long as we can hear you, you're fine.
He is going to take some time to be able to get on the field because he's only been playing ball for 3 years.
So, Tony, what does it do for a UCLA fan to hear about all the last-minute gets across town at USC?
It's a little deflating, but you also got to realize that that's a byproduct of how USC finished the season and how UCLA finished the season. And UCLA had a horrible year. They got beat for the second year in a row by SC, and these are the things that happen. These are the results that come from it, and you've got to put a better product on the field. You've got to compete better, and that's just the way it's going to work. Again, the biggest problem on the team last year was the offensive line. They have a lot of bodies. We just don't know what kind of talent they have coming there. It would have been good to get a couple of wideouts in this class, but there weren't a lot of ones that Moore was really ever in the hunt for, and so If you're a UCLA fan, it's a good class. It is what it is. It's not a great class, but you had some of the best players in the country locked in before today ever came along. So you got to look at that. And you know what? If you're an old time UCLA guy, if you're an old school UCLA guy, you're going to recognize the name Quentin Lake. He's a recruit from Santa Ana, California, defensive back, and the son of former UCLA great Carnell Lake and former Pittsburgh Steeler great Carnell Lake. So he's a Bruin, and you always like having the kids in the family come back.
All right. It's a good indication when you check out the Twitter handle and the particular person has the name of their favorite team within their Twitter handle that they're pretty dedicated. Tony Bruin. Yes, love it. Tony Syracuse from Last Word on Sports joining us to talk UCLA football. Tony, we appreciate the contribution, sir.
Anytime, Mark.
All right, college football coast to coast. This is our National Signing Day special. So you only get 1 hour out of us each and every week, but for the last 2 weeks, it's been about 2 hours with recruiting coming to a close and, of course, National Signing Day. A bit of a different story coming out of Baylor than most storylines across the country because you've got a coach coming from the East Coast who didn't seem based on what I've heard, to be a great fit as analyzed by a lot of people. I thought it was a tremendous get for this Baylor program, and there have been a lot of challenges surrounding, we know, off the field that make recruiting very difficult, but we're talking a top 40 class there at Baylor, and Matt Rule off to a good start. We bring in Sean Cordy from Sikkim, a 365, to break down the Bears and Matt Rule. Sean, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Mark. I mean, today's Baylor's birthday. They're over 200 years old now, and Baylor's playing Kansas tonight. Should be a pretty fun night for Baylor, especially with the top 40 class.
You got to run that by me again. Whose birthday?
It's Baylor's. It's their anniversary.
Baylor's birthday. I'm going to guess that this university was established in 1809. No, it's newer than that. I'm going to say 1908.
1845 is when they founded.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm a bit off there. Hopefully I do better in analyzing college football. Okay. Your thoughts about the Baylor class with Matt Rule, of course, having the challenges off the field and then also have the challenges of not having the complete recruiting cycle to work with.
It's absolutely incredible what Rule has been able to do with the little amount of time that he had. And especially look at December. You had just one player. You had Jalen Petrie. He was the only recruit that Baylor had for a while, and Baylor was projected to be a top 10, top 15 recruiting class for the longest time. And then once all this more allegations start coming along, then the recruits just started dropping by the dozen. And when Rule came around, like you said, he seemed like to be a abstract hire, but the closer you look into it, he's a pastor's son. He really buys into Baylor's program and the atmosphere, and in turn, a lot of recruits did too, 27 recruits in total. So that's really impressive considering he basically had 2 months to do this all.
When you look down the list of signees, who catches your attention? Who may we see, if not this fall, making an impact in 18 or 19?
Yeah, so Rule, he's basically said that he's not planning on starting freshmen unless he feels that they're ready. And the same goes for sophomores. He would love to start freshmen. He says that he's looked at studies that show that freshmen, if they play their first year, they physically do better, they're mentally healthier. So he would love to do that. So you look down the list, you got wide receivers like R.J. Sneed, who had Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss looking at him, and he chose Baylor. He chose Matt Rule. And then you also have Xavier Newman. He's at the top. He's an ESPN 300 selection right now. Baylor has two other ones, another wide receiver, and someone else I'm figuring out at the top of my head. But we're also bringing in a more local kid, Ashton Logan. He's a safety, but he's going to be brought in to play linebacker. He reminds me a little bit of Trayvon Blanchard, and for the more national crowd, you could kind of compare him to Sua Cravens or Taylor Mays if you want to dig back that far. He's a really hard-hitting 6'2", 220 pounds playing safety. He's very agile, can play linebacker too, and we should see what Rule can do with him.
So a lot was made on this day about some of those uncommitted players that that 25 to 40 players that were uncommitted until this final day, and the ones from Texas not making that decision to stay in Texas. I'm going to guess that this Baylor class, I haven't looked through the locale for these players, but I got to think that Texas is supplying most of these players.
Yeah, typically Baylor has gotten a lot of Texas players, but this is a pretty abstract class because you also have 6 other states contributing. You have 3 from New Jersey, you have someone from Florida, and so with the northeastern side that rules come from, he was able to keep those players' trust and bring them down 1,000 miles. And so that's not something Briles or Grove was able to do, or mostly Briles, because he was a Texas man. And now you bring someone with New England connections from Matt Rule, and he has already shown that he can go beyond Texas. So while there was 20 recruits from Texas, there's still more than we're used to getting elsewhere.
Yeah, considering the competition out there in the Big 12 and elsewhere, considering the challenges off the field that we've delved into on other segments, won't talk about now, and certainly considering not having the full recruiting cycle, Matt Rule, outstanding job. We know that he can coach on the sideline, and we know what he did at Temple. Baylor might be able to weather this storm and get through it, a la Penn State. It might be able to be done there at Baylor with a guy like Matt Rule in place.
And also, this is his best recruiting class he's ever had. Temple, I think he peaked at around 60. And now he's at 38, 39, depending on your source. And looking at the rest of the Big 12, that's actually really impressive because the only team in the top 15, top 20 was Oklahoma at number 8, both by ESPN and 24/7. Then you have Texas, TCU, Oklahoma State, all around the mid-30s, early 30 range. So Baylor being at 39 is quite impressive.
Well, Sean, I'm going to guess that he's got a better recruiting class at Baylor than he ever had at Temple. I would have bet significant amounts of money that was the case.
For sure. But, I mean, that only shows you the ceiling that he can elevate this to.
Definitely. Matt Rule, good hire, no doubt, there at Baylor. Sean Cordy joining us on occasion here at Mark Rogers TV to talk Baylor, also the Big 12 in general. Sean from Sikkim 365. We appreciate you jumping on board, Sean.
No problem, Mark. Gotta go watch the game now. All right.
All right, watch the basketball. All right, and Sean alluded to this when you break down some of the numbers and look where these players are coming from and where they're going. The Big 12 with a rough day. So the SEC, as has been the case for at least 10 years, if not before, with the population shifting west and shifting south, it plays into the SEC's hands from that standpoint. And they were good football playing states, great football playing states anyway, but the SEC picking up just about a third of the signees in the ESPN Top 300, the Big Ten at number 2. And since we were talking to Sean about the Big 12 last with only at last count 27 signees out of the top 300. USC almost matched that by themselves, almost matching the Big 12 production by themselves, and almost matching that on the final day. It was we're overstating the late surge by the Trojans maybe a little bit, but it was impressive. We are joined by Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles. Nick and I knocked around the class a little bit earlier today, and Nick, that Clay Helton can finish, but I don't know if it's him or it's USC, because this seems to have been a trend even before Helton took charge.
Well, I certainly think that tradition, that campus, everything USC brings is probably its strongest selling point. I don't think any one particular coach, certainly not after their first full season, is going to be a better salesperson than the campus itself. But you're right. He closed really well. He closed strongly last year, and this year, though, if anyone earned their paycheck today, it was Clay Helton, for sure. That guy, I don't know if this is too dated of a reference, but that guy is absolutely the Mariano Rivera of college National Signing Day, because that guy, just recruit after recruit. They had about 6 main targets. They got all of them. They lost, I think, one guy they were sort of talking to, Aubrey Solomon. They lost him to Michigan. all of the verbal commits they had coming in stuck with them. There was no flips. There was a little bit of a scare with their 5-star running back, Stephen Carr, but he came on board as well. Pretty much everything you could have wanted to go right for USC today did go right.
Yeah, so it's hard for me to imagine that things don't normally go right for USC, considering what, and you alluded to it, what's in their corner in regards to selling to a recruit. So unless you've got a questionable coach, Lane Kiffin, unless you've got scholarship reductions all over the place and this kid wants to win and sees the writing on the wall that it's going to be difficult, unless you've got those challenges, if you're even, or even if you're a little bit behind on the closing stretch, USC can certainly close it because they can say, hey, look at the sky on your last visit. Feel the warm temperatures. Look at the other sites around you, whether they be aesthetic or otherwise. And that's got to be a big selling point.
Yeah, and it also helps that Southern California in particular is just a hotbed for football talent. California, you know, very large population, has lots of great football players, a lot of concentration down in Southern California. You know, no disrespect to our friends over in Westwood, but UCLA, for the most part, doesn't necessarily compete all the time with USC for those top recruits. So in a lot of ways, USC is kind of the main show, certainly in California. And now they're going out to Texas and Florida and going across the country and getting recruits too. So, you know, being in Los Angeles helps. Being in a place where the weather's always gorgeous helps. But I have to say, a lot of recruits who signed today are, when they were interviewed, all kind of said a big part of the reason why they stuck with USC, or they chose USC, is because of how genuine Clay Helton was and how he sort of genuinely loved the program, believed in the program. They sort of bought into that genuineness. A couple of guys flat out said Clay Helton told him, explore all your options, go talk to all the other teams, make sure you get the pick right. And a lot of them just, you know, they got the feeling that was very refreshing, which is probably why you got some of these surprises like Tufele, or some of the other guys that a lot of folks I don't think thought USC was going to get, that USC ended up getting. I think they bought into being USC helps, but I think a lot of them really bought into Clay Helton as a coach and as a person. And I think that shines through, and certainly going on a heck of a run to end the season to show that, you know, he isn't just a nice guy. It works on the field too. That's certainly going to help you close as well. But I think not only is this a great class from a star perspective, but this is a great class for USC from a needs perspective. Mark, you and I have been talking about this all season. Throughout 2016, the USC's biggest weakness was going to be their defensive front seven. They got Stevie T transferred in from Utah. He helped bail them out, but he's gone now. He was a senior transfer. And this signing day, they picked up 6 or so guys on the defensive front. All 4 stars and 3 stars, all really talented. They got loaded up front. This class really turned the defensive front 7 into their biggest weakness, from their biggest weakness into what could be their biggest strength. And rather sort of un-USC like fashion, they really nailed home the offensive line too. Clay Helton loves his balance. For all the talk about Sam Darnold and Juju Smith-Schuster and slinging the ball around, Clay Helton's still going to tell you, we want balance. We're going to run the ball. So for him to bring in guys like Austin Jackson and a bunch of really good, 3 in particular, great offensive linemen, huge for USC, because they're losing a lot of talent on the O-line. So this is, I think, from a needs perspective, exactly what USC wanted. All of the stars and everything, that certainly is reason to get excited. But in a couple years, I think we're going to find out just how great this class was in terms of needs, not just, you know, here's a bunch of flashy 5 stars, let's put them on the field, and then get beat by the likes of Stanford when they punch us in the mouth up front. I think particularly looking at this class in 2017, I think that's very much going to start to change if you're USC.
And if nothing else, USC certainly wins every battle when a recruit takes off like 14 shirts and finishes with one. So USC is 1 for 1.
We really didn't get any crazy stories today from National Signing Day. No stories of like a kid getting lost or couldn't find a fax machine or his parents.
No, that's the best I could do.
Yeah, it was just it was Levi Jones and some shirts. So it's, I guess that'll have to be the highlight of the day in terms of drama.
All right, everyone. If you want more in-depth coverage on USC football, including, of course, National Signing Day, you join Nick on Conquest Chronicles. You also join us for a more in-depth report on the National Signing Day class for USC at Mark Rogers TV, and the videos posted again at Conquest Chronicles. Then you can also supplement that with tons of articles and information on this big Trojan class that came all the way up to numbers 4 in the 24/7 Sports Composite, which is extremely impressive considering they weren't nudging out a bunch of wannabes out of those positions in the top 5. All right, Nick, we appreciate the time. We will join soon and discuss some more off-season news and notes.
Absolutely, Mark. Looking forward to it.
All right, college football coast to coast every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. That was Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles. We cut a USC segment each and every Wednesday night that's posted to Mark Rogers TV, Conquest Chronicles on the SB Nation platform for USC Athletics. And then you can also catch us on our Pac-12 channel, Mark Rogers TV, Pac-12 on YouTube. All right, now we get to the king of the night. The king of the night, because if you look at the recruiting rankings, you go to the top each and every time, just about each and every year. It's been, I believe, 9 consecutive top 5 to top 10 finishes. It's pretty much a composite number 1 class over the last 4 or 5 years. We bring in Stephen M. Smith from Touchdown Alabama to talk about the Crimson Tide and the abundance of riches there. Stephen, take it away.
Well, Mark, I'm not the king. Nick Saban is the king. I just happen to be covering it for him. So I'm not.
You're more entertaining than Nick Saban.
True. I'll take that. But this class, pretty much business as usual. Alabama did have a slight scare. It was a slight story for Jerez Parks, the defensive lineman 4-star, who really wanted to come to Alabama, had an emotional moment when he made his announcement, couldn't quite decide where he wanted to go to, so he put off his commitment for about a couple of hours. And when he finally was able to decide, Alabama had already had so many defensive linemen commit that he was actually forced to gray shirt. He was given the choice to either gray shirt to come in 2018 or take a chance at going to another school. Jerez Parks chose to gray shirt. So aside from that and losing Aubrey Solomon to Michigan, Alabama's class pretty much failed exactly the way it wanted to. Nick Saban going out to Louisiana, getting a lot of big-time recruits from the LSU area. But this class, you want to talk about the depth of this class, Alabama being able to hit needs at quarterback, wide receiver, running back, offensive line, everywhere there was a need, especially on that defensive line, an area where it struggled in this national championship game, not being able to have those fresh bodies rotate. So with Alabama getting Isaiah Buggs, Fedarian Mathis, and also LeBron Ray on that front line to keep those fresh bodies was very, very key.
So this business of ranking recruiting classes has been in vogue for about 12 or 13 years. ESPN, Rivals, Scout, 24/7, etc. And this may be the top class during that time frame with 21 total commitments out of the ESPN 300 out of 29 total. Stephen, of course, most of these guys are going to line up behind other 5-star recruits trying to get on the field. But if there's a guy or two that you think could make an impact this fall, who would those guys be?
If I had to go with 2, I would go with Alex Leatherwood, the offensive tackle, and number 2, Jerry Jeudy, the wide receiver. I think those two can make an immediate impact. Alex Leatherwood at left tackle has tremendous size, good hand technique, great leg drive. We're feeling right there for the departed Cam Robinson. Keep in mind, a lot of true freshmen have played at left tackle or at either tackle position for Alabama under Saban. Remembering Big Andre Smith at left tackle in 2008. Of course, Cam Robinson, his freshman year at left tackle 2014. Last year, Jonah Williams at right tackle 2016. So a lot of freshmen have been able to come in and really take hold of those offensive tackle positions. Alex Leatherwood has that type of potential. And number two, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, here's a kid that he and Calvin Ridley went to the same high school. They both went to Monarch High in Coconut Creek, Florida, before Jeudy transferred to Deerfield Beach, Florida. And Jeudy told reporters he wants one more year with Calvin, and this next season can become that year. This guy has the ability to get on the field and make things happen, kind of following in the steps of Amari Cooper, of course, Julio Jones, and also Calvin Ridley. Can Jeudy be the next freshman to step on the field and make an immediate impact? I think he can.
All right. He's a writer for Touchdown Alabama. He is the captain of Team No Sleep. And most importantly to me, he is a contributor here at Mark Rogers TV and one of the very best. Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. And I cut a segment each and every week talking Alabama football. And again, it's a recruiting class that you'll be able to talk about going into spring practice, Stephen.
Spring practice, fall camp, and probably the first week of the college football season if you're betting on it.
All right, Stephen, you take care. Have a great night, sir.
You too.
All right, college football coast to coast every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. We still have reports coming your way from some of the top programs in the country, including Penn State, Auburn, Oklahoma included, as well as, hey, let's not forget our friends there in North Carolina. Winston-Salem in particular. Robert Reinhardt joining us from Blogger So Dear to talk some Wake Forest football. And, hey, we're not going to see Wake Forest in the top 10, the top 20, the top whatever. But, hey, coming off a nice 7-win season, a bowl victory, very impressive showing against Temple. Robert, your feelings about, again, I know that you're not going to look at the stars. You're not going to look at the rankings to say, hey, what was this recruiting class? You're going to look at need and personnel and try to match it up and see were some needs met. And how do you feel about this Wake Forest class?
I think it's really strong on the defensive end. I appreciate you having me on, and I especially like the juxtaposition of coming on after the Alabama guy. 21 commits to the top 300. I don't think Wake's ever had one of those in the top 300, so that's certainly interesting. But I think Wake Forest, historically, when our teams are good, we have strong defenses, and that's what I think you'll see in this class in particular. If you look at the 247 composite rankings of our top 7 commits, 6 are on the defensive side, two at corner, 2 at linebacker, and then two on the defensive line. So a lot of talent outside of the state of Georgia, and for those top guys that we got, I thought we did a really nice job of beating out some other Power 5 programs for guys, including Notre Dame, Mississippi State, West Virginia for a few, Kentucky for a few, Ole Miss to name one. So, they're not blue chip 4 and 5 stars in that sense, but, not all 3 stars are created equally. And really, when you're looking at 3 stars, you want to see 3 stars who had other Power 5 offers. So it's good to see us beating out some of those programs for some of these recruits.
Robert, you alluded to both the pluses and minuses at the same time of being situated where you are, right in the heart of ACC country, and we know how ACC football has taken off in the last couple of years, and the strength of the programs have certainly are on the rise, but also it's a place where the SEC will dive in. You mentioned going to Georgia, one of the hotbeds for college football talent, probably right in line after California, Texas, and Florida. So where are these kids coming from in terms of Wake's
a lot of the
signings?
A lot of the Southeast, about a quarter of our kids in this class and throughout the entire team are from the state of North Carolina. So one thing Clawson has really tried to do during his time period is really focus on players who were within about a 6-hour driving range, because it's so important to be able to get these kids to come onto campus multiple times through camps, unofficial visits, whatever it is, so that they really get a feel for the school. Obviously, if you're situated in a hotbed like Texas or Florida, there are much more talented recruits within that range. So I thought, under Jim Grobe, we really tried to recruit a lot of players out of Florida. We've gone away a little bit from that, getting more players out of South Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, and the DMV around DC is where the majority of our players are coming from.
Robert Reinhard holds down the fort there at SB Nation's platform for Wake Forest athletics, blogger So Dear. And Robert, we like it when Wake's winning football games and coming off a successful season. That means we get to talk to you a little bit more often.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Always happy to talk Wake Forest football, especially when it's a Wake Forest football team that won a bowl game and had an above 500 record this year. So definitely excited about the future of the program.
Okay, Robert, we'll get geared up for spring practice, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, absolutely. Take care.
All right, college football coast to coast. We just talked to Robert about Wake Forest. Demon Deacons coming off a bit of a surprise and winning 7 games out of 13 in a bowl victory over a 10-win Temple team. 64th ranked class, according to 24/7 Sports, for Wake Forest. No 5 stars, of course, no 4 stars. 17 3 stars for Wake out of 21 total signees. Jeff Greenberg, as we stay in the ACC, is joining us from inside the ACC to talk some North Carolina football and Larry Fedora's class of 21. Jeff, how you doing tonight?
Good, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So we discussed what it looked like the class was going to shape into just a few weeks ago. Your thoughts about where we stood a couple weeks ago and how this class shaked out in the closing days?
Well, it held true to what we talked about last week. And the one player they were waiting to hear about was Daz Newsome, the #1 cornerback out of Virginia, who did end up going with the Tar Heels. He had decommitted from Maryland on his official visit, and it was basically down to UNC and Virginia Tech, and he went with the Tar Heels. So that was a big pickup. Everything else kind of fell into line as expected. The class finished up, depending on the service you look at, top 25 to top 30, top 5 in the ACC. Coach Fedora described it as a very athletic group of guys across multiple positions. The staff really feels like it's what they call a cornerstone class that's diverse, that could be the next foundation piece. The same way they talked about Ryan Switzer and Mitch Trubisky's class, that's what they're looking at with this class. And they have 5 4-star players, which is the second most in the Fedora era. They actually spread their net a little wider, went to 9 different states for this one. Half the players still were from North Carolina and Georgia. They got the top 4 players, or 4 out of the top 10 players in North Carolina. Everybody else went out of state, so they were able to secure in-state guys that they're really trying to push for. They reached into Tennessee, got 3 guys, which is more than the last 7 years combined. So again, their net went a little wider. In terms of focus areas, offensive line and defensive back. Offensive line, they literally wanted to go after a complete line, and they did get 5 guys that they're excited about. The 5 guys come together and weigh about 1,500 pounds between the 5 of them, anchored by 2 6'6", 320-pound tackles in Jordan Tucker and Marcus McKeithen. And then we talked about last time, they got the #1 player out of North Carolina, number 10 guard in the nation, Jonah Melton. So that really locked up that offensive line portion. Some guys to keep an eye on that we mentioned last time: Jake Lawler, the #1 defensive end out of North Carolina. Trey Shaw is a 4-star guy out of Georgia who actually UNC beat a lot of the SEC teams in that area that were going after him. And then Michael Carter is a guy to keep an eye on with the need at running back. He was Mr. Florida in the 6A classification, 3,000 plus all-purpose yards, 45 touchdowns this season. Coach Fedora said he reminds him a lot of Gio Bernard. You'll see him. He's already an early enrollee, so you'll see him hit the field a lot, I think, this year. So those were some of the highlights. Again, with the coach thinking this is a cornerstone class. They took 21 total. They picked up another transfer running back this week from Auburn, but the school can't officially announce those, but he did. The player did. And Coach Fedora said that they've got a little more room. I think they're working on 3 or 4 more guys that could possibly transfer in, either as a grad transfer or a transfer.
Hey, Jeff, if we put the recruiting rankings in context of the competition, things can possibly change or the perspective can change. So if we go to the Coastal Division circa 2012 or 13, you're looking at Duke maybe being the best team in the division, and Miami's on probation, and Virginia Tech slogging along at 7-6 a couple consecutive years. And just spin it ahead a couple years, and the division has really taken a step up across the board. Almost every program is better than it was just a couple years ago. So a top 25 to 30 class looked really good a couple years ago. Now it's still a good class, but it's kind of just treading water versus the competition.
Yeah, I think the division as a whole, when you look at it, you've got new coaches that injected a lot of excitement. You've got Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech, had a great first year. You have Mark Richt at Miami, who's always having great recruiting success, and now he's doing it in the hotbed in Florida. So I would look at it in the terms of with the bump you usually get from a first-year coach and the excitement around that, like Virginia Tech and Miami did, for UNC to hold serve, stay within reach of those guys, especially Virginia Tech and North Carolina's class are pretty interchangeable. Miami, again, I think you're going to see Mark Richt do that year in and year out and have top 15 classes. It's not historically irregular for Miami, and you add Mark Richt's recruiting prowess there, and it's not surprising. But staying in the range of those two guys in the Coastal Division is what Larry Fedora needs to do at North Carolina to keep his foothold and be in the race for the Coastal Division year in and year out.
Jeff Greenberg, one of our top contributors here for the last few years here on Mark Rogers TV. Jeff, we always appreciate the time. You can join Jeff on Inside the ACC, and he has a weekly conversation. There's not a whole lot of guys that can say this across the nation with a major college football coach, meaning Larry Fedora, each and every week. So it's not just run-of-the-mill X's and O's. They delve into some interesting topics concerning the coach's perspective on football, on recruiting, on all sorts of things, even away from the football field. So, Jeff, we appreciate the time.
Thanks, Mark, always.
All right. Again, the ESPN 300 tells us, and you can go to any service, that the SEC is going to continue to churn out talent as it brings it in. Most of the footprint of the SEC brings in most of the top 300 players in the nation. We're talking about 60%. Of course, you got to take that into context, meaning that footprints of these conferences overlap. So that's not just a SEC footprint. Let's go to the West Coast now. Let's talk some Washington football. Of course, we got to give the Huskies some love, especially coming off an impressive season, the Pac-12 championship and the college football playoff appearance. Aaron Severcrop joins us from UW Dog Pound to talk up the Huskies. Aaron, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. How about yourself, Mark?
I'm doing great. I know, well, I'm going to conjecture that you're happy with the class, but maybe not completely happy because you could have grabbed a couple other guys that maybe slipped through your fingers the last week.
Yeah, we unfortunately lost a decommitment to USC last weekend. He was our highest rated commitment in Marlon Tuipiloto. Although we lost him, we had a typical class that Chris Peterson likes, which is quiet at the end. He doesn't like a lot of drama on signing day. Lost the number one offensive tackle to Stanford out of Washington, but all in all, it was a solid class. I think out of
Aaron, we might be losing you here. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can.
Would love for you to just kind of point to two or three guys that you're hoping to see make an impact and expect to be those type of players in Seattle.
So Ty Jones is the first name that comes to mind. Ty had an offer from a late offer from UCLA and Ohio State, and he chose to stay committed to the University of Washington. He was an Army All-American standout. That's the first guy that's coming to my mind. Second is Hunter Bryant. He's the number 5 rated tight end by 247. He's a really good tight end who's going to be used as kind of a slot hybrid wide receiver. He has a lot of size. and he also has a lot of athleticism. And lastly, Elijah Molden, number one cornerback out of Oregon. His dad played in the NFL for 9 years, and the Huskies will need some guys to play in the secondary.
Alex Molden, if I recall. I believe he played with the Falcons. I remember him with Oregon for sure.
Yeah, it was quite a steal to get a Oregon legacy recruit to sign with the University of Washington, and Duck fans are not happy about it.
And you guys have a little bit of a rivalry from what I understand. It gets a little heated up there.
Yeah, most people don't know in the Northwest, even though they think Washington State is UW's biggest rival, I would say that the University of Oregon is actually our biggest rival. So anytime we can beat them, we're doing good.
And maybe things calm down there just a little bit because Oregon was pretty dominant there for a while, but you guys have roared back. So it's good to see for college football fans that football is alive and well there up in the Northwest with Washington back on the national map. Aaron Sieverkrop joining us from UW Dog Pound, our friends at SB Nation. Aaron, you're a new contributor here. Hope you're having a good time. You're welcome back anytime to talk some Washington football as we get ready for spring football.
Thank you, and let me know if you need anything else.
Excellent. All right, we've talked to a ton of bloggers here in our first hour and a half, and we hope to get to Michigan State, Penn State, Florida, Auburn, and that should about do it, I believe. So we've knocked out about 15 reports, and here's a familiar face, Mr. Jamie Hancock from Preps Nation, to talk some Auburn Tigers we talked about it last week, Jamie. Whoever's backyard it is, I guess it's Alabama's backyard that Auburn's playing in. Let's forget about the Tide. I apologize for even mentioning them, but I started down that road. We're going to stick to Auburn, and we're going to stick to Gus Malzahn's latest group of talent that he's brought in, which ranks about 8th or 9th in the country. It's a pretty good class.
It is a good group, Mark, and you don't offend me by mentioning Alabama. That doesn't bother me in the least. No big deal there. I mean, they are the perennial conference team in the country. They're in our division of the conference, so no big deal. No inferiority complex here.
All right. There shouldn't be, because it's a top 10 class. It's a top 10 to 15 program, and there's should be no apologies there. So Gus Malzahn obviously reached his heights a few years ago, and the program, we've been kind of searching for what kind of program he's going to lead, if he's going to still be the guy going into the future. He's been kind of on the high wire to a certain extent. Is this class going to help him out? And what are some of the highlights of National Signing Day here in 2017 on the Plains?
You know, it'll be a couple years before we can truly tell what effect this class is going to have. However, when you talk about this group, it's definitely a top-heavy bunch. Jared Stedham coming in at quarterback is one of the main keys to this class. If he's very successful at the quarterback position, a successful program, at least in terms of, say, getting to 10 wins, that's where they need to get back to. You look at the running back position, Devon Barrett is a good football player, but that's not a position that is of dire straits at Auburn. Then you flip over to offensive tackle. That is a big-time need for the Auburn family, because they have some good offensive linemen, but there are guys that are guard, right tackle type players. Calvin Ashley at 6'8", 311 pounds is going to be a big factor in how good this class is. If he can anchor down a tackle spot, preferably the left tackle spot, for about 3 years, it will be successful from that standpoint. You throw in big Austin Troxell at 6'7", 325 out of Madison Academy, that's another guy that could anchor down a tackle spot for this team, preferably right tackle going into the future.
Jamie joins us on a regular basis here at Mark Rogers TV and has a different perspective concerning his work there at Preps Nation. Join him on his website, follow him on Twitter. You're going to gain a different perspective on high school and college football. Jamie, maybe some things I tend to ask you a little bit different questions than the rest of the guys that I have on here because of your work. Anything that stood out to you in evaluating players this year?
Yeah, you know, I thought this year the country had a good wide receiver crop. I also noticed some tendencies of players changing. Of course, everybody wants to go to Alabama and some of the big programs. However, I saw several guys choose some non-Power 5 teams over Power 5 teams. You hear that every year, but a lot of times these guys lose the offer, or it's not a committable offer from the Power 5 team, so they choose somebody from the MAC or whatnot. However, in a case of two guys at one of the national powerhouse schools, McGill-Toolen, two wide receivers chose, one in Marlon Williams, who's a longtime USC commitment, chose to go to Central Florida over LSU. The LSU offer was a committable offer. Also, his teammate followed suit in Jalen Tolbert, who got late offers from Vanderbilt and Michigan State, took a good visit to Michigan State, had a good time, however, chose to take an offer from South Alabama, who did not offer him until the last few weeks. And that is obviously a close school in proximity to them, but he's also getting to play baseball at South Alabama. So you're seeing some guys that are citing the issues of playing time and the ability to excel early in over the larger offer. So that's something that I've seen the last year or two, and is a very interesting dynamic, especially with two guys that I have dealings with.
All right. As we approach spring football, we'll have Jamie on a number of times, as many times as he'll have us to talk Auburn and the SEC. Jamie, we always appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
All right, College Football Coast to Coast. Again, this is our first annual, and maybe my director, Marty McPadden, won't want to go through this again, but he's up for the challenge, no question about that. Our first annual National Signing Day special. We went about 2 hours last week. We'll do about the same tonight, unless we give the floor to Dan Rubin and he just doesn't let it go. Then we might be here past midnight. Dan Rubin joining us from BC Eagles to talk Boston College. Dan, how you doing tonight?
When you said midnight, you mean midnight West Coast time, right? Not West Coast, not East Coast time.
Of course I did. You're good for 5 or 6 hours alone. So, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. I think it's a good day to be an Eagle. It's a great day to be an Eagle, and that's not just because Steve Addazio decided to be the most impressive tweets of the entire signing day. He
also produced a very odd video from his office. What was that all about? Did you see that?
Salt Bay. He twisted the salt. So there's a Turkish guy that turned into a meme with the whole thing with like this guy like salts and cures meats, and Steve Addazio decided to sprinkle the salt like he did at the end of the video, and he followed that up with a Sopranos video that he released later on in the day. So once again, he ran off the plug twice last year. He's doing it again this year, and what more could you want? It's signing day and the coach is having fun.
All right, Dan, it's the 66th rated class in the country according to 247 Sports, but you can coach them up there at Boston College unlike anybody in the ACC. So what do you like out of these 20 commits?
A lot of versatility and a lot of staying true to what Boston College does. They had a lot of recruits, 15 of them from within a 5-hour radius of Boston, which I know for the rest of the country they tend to look at it and they say, well, it's New England or New Jersey and up into the Northeast. So it's not the type of players that you're going to get down in Texas or down in Florida, which Boston College does have some success getting. They had a couple of recruits coming in from California as well. But they did what they do best, which is get a bunch of guys who are very raw and very good, that can be good, but they're not going to get guys who are going to be impact players right away. I think Addazio came out in his press conference and actually said the words, these are not guys we want playing right away. They want to be able to bring them in and coach them up. But we're very happy with some of the names that came in. A couple of names that people maybe don't see. Caleb Stoneburner, whose brother was, I know, a big-time player in the college scene. And guys like Tate Haynes, whose dad was Mike Haynes from the old Oakland Raiders and New England Patriots. Guys like Pat Brown, who was his teammate, a pancake-type blocker. And then you get the icing on the cake when you have A.J. Dillon finally sign the NLI, finally come to Boston College, and he's your 4-star running back who is already drawing comparisons to his future as being Andre Williams. So it's a good class. It's not going to jump off the stat sheet. It's not going to jump off the paper, but that's perfectly fine by us.
Dan, if the class doesn't work out, you bring in the family members. You got a Pro Football Hall of Famer there, and then you got is that Caleb Stoneburner, meaning Jake Stoneburner, who was a tight end at Ohio State, correct?
That would be correct. And Caleb Stoneburner actually came in as he's the number 7 recruit wide receiver based out of Ohio. He's I don't think he's as highly touted as his brother was, but hey, he's got the family, he's got the pedigree.
So we know that these guys are going to be impact players. You got 20 here. There's probably going to be, if we do the law of averages, there's going to be like 8 or 10 of these guys are going to be at least role players that are significant. And then there's going to be 2 or 3 stars, at least stars on the team within the team concept. So if you could peg 1 or 2 guys that you think you need to come through because of personnel losses, and I know that Adazio doesn't want these guys playing this year, but based on their position, or if just flat out based on what you've seen, what you've heard, think, hey, this guy he could play past his 3-star ranking or whatever it is.
Nate Emmer is the name to keep an eye on. He's a 6'5", 250-pound defensive lineman. He played two-way in high school. He was an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. He had 75 tackles his senior year of high school and had 17 tackles for losses, 8.5 sacks. He has that kind of big size. But Boston College is also losing guys on the defensive line to begin with, so he's the type of guy who can come in, maybe get some snaps if he decides to play if they decide to play him right away, and tend to work him up. The other guy who I think would be a really interesting prospect is C.J. Lewis, who comes in as the number 7 prospect out of Connecticut. He's an athlete, not really sure where he's going to play yet, but considering that there is some depth at the wide receiver position, that they can always use more athletes there, maybe convert him. They lost some guys in the secondary. He's a big kid. He's 6'4", 200 pounds. I'd like to see where they can use him, maybe as a safety, maybe as a stretch receiver who can come in and maybe make an impact right away. Those are some names that I think are going to be pretty interesting.
All right, Dan Rubin always supplying us with Boston College football knowledge. Join him at bceagles.com, or if you're in the Northeast, a hockey rink near you.
And on Sunday, I'm just going to throw this out there where we are totally torn at Boston College. Do you root for the Patriots? Do you root for Matt Ryan? I don't know what to do. I'm probably rooting for the Patriots.
Yeah, I think you're a little bit more than probably rooting for the Patriots. I don't think it's that much of a dilemma. I don't think the ties to Matt Ryan are that strong. I know that if he was playing anybody else on the face of the planet, it would be a Matt Ryan camp, but that this is the one exception.
Well, I'll leave you with this, Mark, that I have yet to meet a person at Boston College, coaches, administrators, staff members, who have said a bad thing about Matt Ryan. There's not a single person who can say a bad thing about him. So if the Patriots have to struggle against somebody, I'm not going to say lose because we all know they're not going to. But if they're going to struggle against somebody, I'd rather it be Matt Ryan.
Okay, they might start saying bad things about Matt Ryan if he throws the game-winning touchdown pass in the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
Fact. Very much a fact.
All right, Dan, it's good to see you. Have a good night.
Talk to you soon, Mark.
All right, Dan Rubin from BC Eagles keeping us up to date on Boston College having won a bowl game over Maryland. And we're hoping that we're good with Florida, Oklahoma. Yes, we are good with Florida because I'm looking at David Waters right now joining us from Gators Breakdown. So, David, we know you just finished up your podcast, so thanks for jumping on board. It's been a long day and night for you. I saw you almost first thing in the morning on Periscope giving us a report on Florida football. So how's the day gone?
Much better than what we thought coming in, Mark. Florida had some room to move up in the rankings and finish with a flurry to finish in the top 10 in most of the recruiting services. So it was a class Jim McElwain needed in his third year to finish with a bang, and it started the day with Daryl Slayton. 4-star, 5-star, however you want to look at it, whoever you're looking at. Big-time offensive lineman and defensive tackle. He dominated an Army practice at the Army All-American game. Florida's going to give him a try at defensive tackle first. That's how they're recruiting. That's what sold him to Florida to begin with. So Daryl Slayton is their big-time, their big get, their best player that they signed, and we'll see what side of the ball he plays on, but more than likely he's going to start out on defense.
Yeah, and I think the other big surprise, especially for Miami fans, is that Christopher Henderson, C.J. Henderson, who's listed as an athlete. I don't know if he's going to play. He's going to play cornerback, correct, David?
Yes, he'll play cornerback. He'll get first crack there. Florida has some need there with the departures of Jalen Tabor and Quincy Wilson. So Christopher C.J. Henderson will slide right in and get every opportunity this fall to play corner for Florida.
Yeah, so out of nowhere, people were criticizing Jim McElwain for a down year, down recruiting class, not Florida standard, but lo and behold, comes in, hits the wire, hits the finish as a top 10 class. Anybody else of note that we could see jumping off the page here very soon?
Yeah, I think who you got to look for right now is wide receiver James Robinson was kind of a surprise for Florida today. It came out Monday that Florida would not admit him. The admissions higher-ups, higher than the athletic director, Scott Strickland, would not allow James Robinson on campus after he was cited for marijuana possession at his Ohio State visit a couple weekends ago. He had some more off-the-field issues previous to that, and it had come out that Florida was not going to let him sign. Well, right before Jim McElwain held his signing day press conference, he sends out the tweet that James Robinson is a Gator. Caught a lot of people by surprise. He's a 4-star wide receiver, 6'3", 6'4", 190, big type of possession receiver Florida could really use. Type of receiver Florida doesn't necessarily really have right now. Can he get his head on straight and come in and make an impact as a freshman? We'll see. We know Jim McElwain's not afraid to play freshman wide receivers. But there is now where Jim McElwain's recruited well at that position the last couple seasons that James Robinson may have trouble just getting in the rotation. But I did mention they don't necessarily have a wide receiver like him right now. So we'll see if he can work his way into the rotation. He's a good third down threat to convert some first downs and a big red zone threat. So if Florida can get that quarterback situation figured out, this freshman can really see the field.
All right, join David Waters. You see his Twitter handle right there. It's a GatorDave_SEC. You got to join him if you love college football, period, but especially if it's the SEC or the Florida Gators. He joins us periodically to knock out some Florida content, and also join him for Gators Breakdown on SoundCloud, and also
SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, all those, and every Tuesday morning on the Bill King Show.
Excellent. David, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, National Signing Day about wrapped up here, but we're hoping to hear from Oklahoma, Michigan State, and Penn State. And we bring in our next guest. All right, I believe we've got Dom Garrett with us from the Only Colors.
Hey, Mark, how's it going, man?
Some green and white. Those are the only colors, right?
You got it. I'm wearing my Lucky Cruton Day shirt. Had this one for about 15 years. So I'm out here in the Pacific Northwest, so it was a little bit of an early day, but really excited. National Signing Day, I think, was considered a relative success in East Lansing.
So, Dom, you know the narrative when it comes to Michigan State recruiting and being able to develop the players, even though the rankings and the stars aren't as high as what the results have been on the field, minus 2016, of course. So it's kind of difficult to judge your program because we can't judge it by the rankings and the stars. So we're looking at a class that's roughly 34th in the country, something in that range, 4 4-stars according to 24/7, 16 3-stars. So you're looking at the personnel, you're looking at what you need, and looking at what you've heard and seen from these guys. So do you think it's a good class?
Yeah, that's always the issue. In the Twitter sphere, I had a lot of people that were coming at me today saying we should save some of these scholarships and not take guys that have only really been offered MAC scholarships, and we should save some of this stuff. But you hit it right on the head. Mark D'Antonio and company have always done a really good job of being able to coach these kids up and take kids that don't have all of the acclaim, but turn them into something big. I heard Jack Conklin's name get thrown around a couple of times. We all know how much work he's done in the NFL. He came in, he was not heralded at all. And, D'Antonio actually said in his press conference today, you never really know when another Jack Conklin's going to come in the door. So, I think that you've seen, especially with programs like Western Michigan, right? PJ Fleck was able to take that type of talent and do something big with it. There's no reason you can't be able to do it at Michigan State. So, they really beefed up on the offensive line. A couple of really big guys that came in there. One of our 4 stars, Kevin Jarvis. And then a guy that I'm actually really excited about, Mustafa Khalifa. He came from Dearborn Heights. So he's a Michigan, state of Michigan kid. Everybody has been really excited about him. He committed early. And, the thing that I think is the best thing for this class is that you see a lot of kids that committed fairly early, including 4-star Hunter Rison at wide receiver. Commit early and don't really flip. There wasn't a lot of change that actually happened, which is always a great sign. Even sticking with a 3-9 season, which a lot of Michigan State fans are going to be really quick to try to forget. But at the same time, seeing those guys and seeing some of those types of commitments come in, I think there's a lot of grit in this class. So it might get back to the days of Michigan State needing to prove itself a little bit more, which I'm totally fine with.
When you say grit, I think Mark D'Antonio, so it fits. There should be grit in this class because that's how he likes it. He almost wants to be the underdog. I would think that he would almost be the guy that would turn down 5-star recruits because he would want to prove that he can win Big Ten championships without them. That's a bit ridiculous, of course. So I'm almost going to play devil's advocate to my opening narrative is that the results on the field have far outweighed what the recruiting rankings have said. But in the last couple years, it appeared as though D'Antonio was starting to parlay that success on the field into higher level recruits, and you were starting to pull in some better recruits and get into that top 20 or 25 range. And maybe this, at least if you look at the way it's rated, might be a bit of a step back, at least in terms of the prognostications.
Yeah, and I, you have to agree with that. I think that ESPN last year had us at 22, and this year I think right now we're sitting at 32. So, anytime you drop down 10, that's no good. We're 6th in the Big Ten, so it's not anything that I'm going to shout from the rooftops and start yelling about how good Michigan State's class was. But at the same time, I think that that's what you have when you have a 3-9 season. That's what you have when you have other coaches in the Big Ten that are as much of powerhouses as any other conference in the country. Anytime you're recruiting in your own backyard against, Jim Harbaugh jumping fully clothed into a pool and Urban Meyer, that kind of stuff's going to happen. But at the same time, I think that there was a lot of, if you want to take any silver lining from this past year, it's the fact that every single weakness that we had was shown completely through. So if you're a coach sitting down in a kid's living room and you say, hey, this is where we were weak, and we need you to help us make us stronger here, you're going to get playing time. You're going to get it probably pretty early. That's something that I think is definitely a benefit. And, I trust D'Antonio to be able to get that moving along.
Well, Dom, I got to say it fascinates me from a program standpoint because I've been watching Big Ten football my whole life, and for a known commodity, a known program, but was pretty much excluding a couple bursts here and there, mired in mediocrity from the 70s until about 2005. Then suddenly D'Antonio raises this to a top 5 program without the great players, at least on paper. It's been pretty fascinating. And now you add the element of, like you say, Harbaugh, Meyer, now James Franklin, and man, this division is crazy good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. I've talked about it before. I think that as far as coaches wise, I would put the Big Ten up against any other conference in the country, especially, on both sides of the conference too, East or West. So, it's a question that I've had before, thinking about D'Antonio as a recruiter. I understand what he could do with a coach. I can understand what he does with talent, but I watched 3 of his periscopes today, and he wasn't doing Salt Bay. He wasn't talking about any of that kind of stuff, so that living room presence, is that missing? Maybe a little bit, but you just have to hope that some of those weaknesses that we had were able to actually get in check a little bit this year and, make it to another bowl game, get another, 2 or 3 8-win seasons, sort of rolling, put this season behind us. I think that's definitely going to move some steps in the right direction to combat those other recruiting juggernauts that we have to deal with on a year-to-year basis.
All right, 3 early enrollees that we'll see in the spring practice field here in a couple months. Dom Garrett joining us from the Only Colors to set us up for Michigan State on National Signing Day, and another what we would expect out of a Michigan State recruiting class on paper. We'll see how it plays out. I would trust the process if I was a Sparty fan, no doubt. Dom, we appreciate the time.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark.
All right, college football coast to coast as we wrap up our National Signing Day special. We have one more contributor. Who will it be? All right, Graham Dudley joins us from Crimson and Cream Machine. Graham, I hope that you haven't been on the line too long. We've tried to set up a process that would get you guys on here quickly and get you off, but we appreciate you waiting around for us. So Oklahoma bringing in, and you set the stage for this last week in our discussion, best recruiting class according to most of the services since 2010. So you've got to be pretty pleased.
Absolutely. Great class for Coach Stoops. And it was a pretty boring National Signing Day, honestly, for Oklahoma fans. We had 27 commits, all 27 of them signed, and we didn't have anybody added at the last minute. But like you said, his best class in years, and usually coaches who kind of fall off on the recruiting trail, not all of them are able to make that back up. So that's really encouraging to see. There were a few guys we were maybe kind of keeping an eye on today, most notably Marvin Wilson, who ended up going to Florida State. We kind of had one eye on him because he really liked his in-home with Oklahoma coaches last week, but didn't end up happening. But that still gives Oklahoma a top 6 to 8 class. The last few guys that we were able to get committed, we got Troy James out of Baton Rouge. We got a wide receiver, Ryan Jones, from North Carolina. We flipped Tyrese Lott from TCU to Oklahoma, and he is an Ardmore guy, Ardmore, Oklahoma. And it's just going to be really tough for any Texas program to pull Oklahoma kids away if we really go after them. And then a few days before that, we committed a defensive back out of Arkansas, Trey Norwood. So 3 of those guys we pulled right out of SEC territory, which is cool to see. We've got 9 Texas kids in our class, 6 Oklahomans, and we were able to pull guys from California and a little bit from the East Coast as well. So all in all, a really encouraging class from Coach Stoops.
Well, Graham, that shouldn't be too surprising. You keep beating up on these SEC teams. I think it's 4 out of 5 after the Sugar Bowl. So Bob Stoops has had his team back up his words in recent years after a bit of a slump against that conference for a few years. So that mighty good to see for Sooner backers. You mentioned the word encouraging. This class getting back into the top 10 and getting back on the national scene, and especially considering the challenge of what is the perception of the Big 12 right now, that Oklahoma is still able to circumvent that and overcome that barrier of what's considered to be a down conference right now, and that didn't seem to matter too much to recruits.
That's got to be the best thing for Oklahoma fans, is we just absolutely recruited the pants off the Big 12 this year. No offense to anybody else. They were able to make some great last-minute runs at Baylor and Texas, but, I mean, those are classes outside the top 25, sitting around the 30 mark, and Oklahoma is up there recruiting with the Florida States and the Michigans of the world, and that's exciting to see. So I don't expect Oklahoma to have this supremacy forever, but it's definitely encouraging anytime that we can out-recruit our own conference and maybe have that level of talent up on our conference rivals. We just went back-to-back Big 12 champions, and there's no reason to think we can't win the Big 12 another few times in the next several years. I think one thing Oklahoma needs to keep an eye on is just the fact that, as we talked about a lot this evening, the SEC and the Pac-12 and the Big 10 aren't having any problems recruiting Texas anymore. And 12 years ago, it was, Oklahoma, Texas, and maybe Texas A&M were recruiting Texas. So Oklahoma got some good Texas signees, but the best Texas signees are going elsewhere, and that's something that Oklahoma is going to want to try to reverse in the next several seasons.
Graham and I getting together on Thursday to discuss the class a little bit more in depth. Graham Dudley joins us from Crimson and Cream Machine, the SB Nation platform for Oklahoma athletics. Graham, we appreciate the time.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for having me on, man.
All right. Once again, it's college football coast to coast every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time. For my director, the best in the business, Marty McPadden, we will see you next week. I'm sorry, I believe we've got another guest. No, we don't. Okay. We will see you next week.